We're happy to announce that on March 20th, Sauna Camp will be coming back to Minnesota for its second annual event. We're going to have 3 panelists talking about wellness. We've got a Mount Everest summiter, we've got 2 Ironman athletes, and the inventor of hostage tape. In addition, we're going to have, of course, 2 hours of sauna and cold plunge with some Himalayan chocolate in between. We'll have themed saunas. We'll have story sauna, silent sauna, community sauna for different topics. And then we'll end with an amazing wood-fired meal from Fumo. All the details are on the CuriousBuilderPodcast.com.
I remember going through the center console of my truck and scaring up $1.25 worth of quarters so that I could buy a slice of pizza on the way home. And that's the cash flow that we had. I had $1.25 to my name. So it was pretty amazing that was where we were.
Today in the Curious Builder Podcast, we have an amazing guest, met him at Contractor Coalition. 2.5 hours is how long the story took the first time. This one's a little bit shorter, 1.5 hours, but I'm telling you, this is a story you do not want to miss. You will be buckled up and you will be just riveted hearing this story. We've got Ted Sihpol from Connecticut telling a story about being indicted for $2.3 billion lawsuit in his journey on his way to becoming a contractor on the East Coast. This is in time for the holidays. Everyone sometimes has to deal with difficult stuff, but I trust no one has dealt with $2.3 billion lawsuit before against the state of New York. So tune in, listen up, share. This is going to be a whopper of an episode. Without further ado, here is Teddy. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I've got a very special guest from the East Coast. I've got Teddy Sihpol from Renaissance Partners in Connecticut. What's up, Teddy?
Hey, how are you, Mark? Good to see you.
Yeah, I always call you Teddy. Do people call you Ted or Teddy? I just like Teddy.
Believe it or not, so I'm the third of. There's now 4 of us, so I'm number 3 in line. So it's my grandfather was Ted, my dad was Teddy, and I was Charlie growing up. But now currently Ted or Teddy.
Charlie, name change. That's amazing. Well, we got to meet at Contractor Coalition in Chicago just a couple months ago, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Just to preface the audience, I had to get you on before the holidays. We're going to turn this around real quick. I am salespeople are easy to sell to. Your story, and we were interrupted a few times. It took 2.5 hours from the moment you started the story. We had bus tours, we had a dinner, we had a presentation, and I can't remember the last time I was so focused and enthralled. It was like watching Avatar for the first time or watching like Lord of the Rings, if you're into that sort of thing. Your story just has to be shared. And so I reached out to you and you said, well, let me check with my wife, Rhonda, to see if it's okay to share. Because this story is unbelievable story. Like literally, it's hard to believe.
You know, it's funny. It tails into a lot of what we did at Contractor Coalition, but I think we'll probably sum it up and come back to zero at the end. But we all go through stuff, and the old axiom is when you sit in front of somebody from a sales perspective, you have no idea what's going through. If they've just lost a loved one, if they've just lost the favorite family pet, but at the end of the day, it's just really about understanding and how we integrate. You know, we all know how to bang 2x4s together, but how we integrate the family portion. I mean, I'm mostly a renovation guy, so taking into the family component of that renovation is huge. And I think that's part of what we witnessed in Chicago.
Well, I think the one thing that was so powerful, we haven't announced it publicly. In fact, I think this will be the first time we announce it publicly. In part of the story you don't even know. Yeah. So Friday night of the Contractor Coalition, we did an open mic. Yeah. And we talked and we just kind of said to break the ice and let it be. One of the things that's the most attractive for me as one of the kind of the members there and kind of the leadership is I love hearing people's real stories, just the authentic real. That's what I loved about the podcast. That's my favorite part about people being real. Well, anyway, we opened it up with what are your biggest failures? And I shared, Nick shared, and in hindsight, they were pretty pathetic failure stories because pretty soon it got real in terms of like one builder talked about almost taking his life and depression. And what I didn't know at the time is our friend, Ron Jensen, who was a previous Contractor Coalition alumni from a few years ago, actually committed suicide that night, the night of Friday. So the night that we came up with that idea we had no idea he was suffering or anything like that. Yeah. But going forward, so we found out the news, I think, Monday after we returned from Contractor Coalition. We didn't really know exactly. We reached out to the family, and now, we found out. And what made it so special when some of those stories were shared about the struggles was just letting people know they weren't alone. And the reason I wanted to get this episode out for a variety of reasons is that the holidays tend to be one of the highest points where people consider taking their own life or hurting themselves. And I just wanted to get this out there to tell people that they're not alone and to have a story, your story. There's so many parts where you could jump off a bridge on your story, and and the average person would have thought life might have got better, but you didn't. And you're going to talk about that in a bit. But
Yeah.
going forward at all future contractor coalitions, that is we're going to call it the Ron Jensen Open Mic Night,
Oh my goodness.
and we're going to explain what happened, why it happened, and why it's important to share these stories. So I just say that with all, first of all, just anyone out there that is struggling, please reach out to community. Please tell your family. Even if you have no one to reach out to Teddy or I. Like,
Yeah.
literally anybody will throw you a ring. You just have to let them know you're struggling, because Ron was the most positive, outward vibing person. You would never suspect it. And at least from my point of view. And so
I didn't
anyway.
know him, Mark, and it's a shame to hear. I did see the news on Monday, and that he was a contractor alumnus, and it honestly breaks my heart to see
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, because we all hit a wall at one point or another, and I think it was incredibly powerful for me. I did not share my story on Friday because I don't think anybody had 2.5 hours on
Does
Friday
it
night.
normally take that long to share the
No,
story? No,
no, and hopefully it won't today, but
no.
we'll try to condense it. But part of it is, you asked so many pointed, really important questions that were great. And there were a couple bus rides and stuff like that in between, and people hopped in and hopped out. And it was really interesting to see the people hop in at the end of the conversation. But I think, yeah, from a personal perspective too, within all of our communities, there's an unbelievable network of individuals that are willing to help. And we've seen that from a personal level. I live in a really special town in Connecticut, and we've got a direct helpline. New York City even has a mental health line that you can reach out to, and I think it's a massive resource. But there's always a way up, and there's always a way out. As unpleasant and as difficult as it is, there is. There's always a better alternative than the nastiness that or the unfortunateness that happens in a situation like that. So it broke my heart to see that news on Monday.
Yeah. Let's get into the story, because we're going to run out of
Sure.
time before we run out of story
Yeah.
details. And I think to set the stage for the audience is your path to becoming a remodeler shows up like halfway through this story. So, and just so that people know, we're doing what's called the Smile Tour this year in 2026. My plan is we have a very strong presence in the Midwest, because I'm in the Midwest in Minnesota. And so when I say the Smile Tour, we're starting in Q1. We're going down from Seattle down the West Coast down to Texas, and then we'll go along the South. That's Q2, up the Eastern Seaboard, Q3, and then Q4. So I'm going to interview you probably a year from now about your business. This one is
Okay.
more in the spirit of like resilience matters.
Yeah.
Kind of like I read that book last year, Do Hard Things. Like
Yeah.
I don't think you meant to do this hard thing, but holy smokes. Most people, they signed up for a 5K and they think a marathon is bad. You signed up for a 5K and did a 1,000-mile run.
Yeah.
That's basically what the analogy of this story is. So without further ado, why don't we dial this back 25
Sure.
years, early 2000s. You're a stockbroker in New York. Let's start the story there.
Sure. Early 2000s. I'm a stockbroker in New York, a single guy. I'm 34 years old, and could do no wrong. And I eventually moved to. I hadn't been super successful, and moved to Bank of America, what was then Bank of America, with a senior vice president at the time as the junior guy. And part of why I was brought on was to find and source new business. So in sourcing new business, we found an individual family that had a very unique style of trading, that they came to us and said, "Hey, we'd love to bring an account to you. Can you do this?" And we said yes. We had to bring it up and down the management chain, but eventually the answer was yes, and it involved a number of personal accounts. It involved a number of institutional accounts, and eventually we got this account up and running throughout the bank using multiple platforms and multiple areas. My partner and I were the point people, and I was the point basically for this account that handled everything across all aspects of the account. And by 2003, we had, I forget the exact stats, but we had grown to one of the top teams at Bank of America production wise, and this account was one of the top producing accounts at the bank. And it was a success story. I mean, it all started on a cold call. So we talk about being salespeople, and I remember
So they called you out of the blue. It wasn't someone you
I
converted.
had actually called them out of the blue, just
Okay.
cold.
Oh, you
Just
called them.
I
Okay.
called them, and then they called back. So this is a Forbes top family account, and I got back to my desk, and they said, "Hey, by the way, they just called you back." I kind of chuckled. I was like, "Okay, great." And I remember distinctly walking up to our very first meeting with my partner and I, who was a senior guy at the time, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, so what exactly were you going to discuss?" And I was like, I don't know. All I know is we got the meeting." And I think being in the renovation side and being the building side, I mean, you never know what you're going to walk into, whether it's some sort of an apartment building or if it's a full blown renovation. And it's why we have qualifying questions before you hop in the truck for 45 minutes and drive
How
somewhere.
just to set the stage for the audience and for myself?
Yeah.
How old were you at this time?
So I was 34 years old.
Okay.
I'm 57 now. So this was a while ago. So it's easier for me to talk about now. Some of the details are a little more muddled.
Well,
Um,
everything is a little bit more rose-colored in hindsight. At the time, we're
oh, of
about to find
course.
out just how difficult it was. So, did you go to their family office or did they come to Bank of
They had a
America?
family office in Midtown Manhattan. We were a couple blocks away, so we literally walked up. We sat down with them. It was the head of the family at the time, handled the financial side, and his chief lieutenant. And they explained the strategy where they would trade mutual funds, and exactly and the particulars behind it, and how it was. And this was the strategy at the time on Wall Street, where a number of people had done it kind of under the guise of it wasn't great, but this family had figured out how to do it with the permission of the funds, so everything was up and above board, which was one of the key factors when Bank of America really looked at it, when we looked at it and said, "Hey, is this something where we can help the family, and is it something that we want to be involved in?" And ultimately the answer was yes. It was a pretty profitable trade for us. It was a pretty profitable trade for the bank. And by 2003, we had, after I had been at the bank for probably a couple of years at that point, we were running a couple $1 billion under management, which is a really big profitable trade for us, and it was a profitable trade for the bank, and it was a great relationship for the family. We did some really cool stuff. Fast forward at that time, I finally convinced my wife to retire, step away from the business. She had stepped away. She was living at home with our 1 year old son at the time. And fast forwarding a bunch of the details, we were on our way home one day
Well,
from,
hang on one second.
yeah, of course.
Part of the story that's sort of important is you got a frame buying the house. So you were buying a house on the coast, like Cape Cod or something like that, as I recall.
Well,
Um,
yeah. So we were in part of convincing my wife to leave the operation, to leave the business, was we had purchased a house, and at the time, this was the booming real estate market in Connecticut. So we had gone to final sealed last bids, and this was the dream house, right? Like, this is we had owned the house, we had sold it, we had moved, and we had searched high and low, and we finally found this thing, and lo and behold, we won this. So we had gone to contract, deposit was in, and it was one of those situations where we looked at this house and we said, okay, look, if I lose my biggest client, are we going to be okay? Yeah, we'll be okay for a year and a half. It'd be fine. If I lose my biggest client, lose my job, will we be okay? Yeah, it'll be a little dicey, but you know what? We'll make it work. And we didn't. Well, just fast forward to it. The answer was, if I lose my job, was indicted and needed to pay $500,000 worth of retainer, are you still going to be okay? And the answer was no. So that's really, so we had signed contracts. Deposit was on our dream house, and we were literally driving home. All was great, beautiful springtime day here in Connecticut, and I got a call from in the car from our biggest client, and I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he said to me in no uncertain terms, it's one of those phrases you'll never forget. He's like, "We need to close the accounts." I was like, "Okay, and which account are we going to close?" He said, "All of them." Now, at this point, we had probably 30 or 40 accounts at the bank that all needed to be unwound and unclosed, all unwound and closed. And
and
naturally,
this is as I recall, this was like a Friday evening, right?
this was a Thursday evening, heading into summer, super quiet, all ready to go. My response is, "Hey, anything in particular? Why are we closing the accounts?" And I remember this phrase distinctly. He said, my family has found better uses for our risk capital. Now, to set the stage here, this was 2002, 2003. The stock market in itself had gone through a pretty rough stretch. Well, the average returns, if I remember correctly, around 10%, depending on where you were. And these guys had managed to put up north of 20% on a pretty regularly basis with half the risk. So to say, okay, we're closing up shop just didn't make a whole lot of sense. We had just inked a bigger deal with them too. So this was a little odd. I hung up, naturally, okay, we'll do whatever you need. Hung up the phone and went into work the next day. And I called the head of funds, and he said, "Oh, does this have anything to do with the subpoena?" I was like, okay, being the last guy to look to, that guy standing at the bottom of the hill waiting for the rock to roll down. Here I was. It's like, naturally, what subpoena was the next words out of my mouth, and it's, oh, we received a subpoena from the attorney general from the state of New York, which was always intriguing. We closed all the accounts.
You closed all the accounts in a single day, like on Friday, or
We closed all the accounts in a I don't know how long it actually took, but yeah, we started
wow.
the process. We liquidated everything. We had the cool thing with mutual funds is they're a next day settlement. So we had 1 day worth of settlements. We transferred out probably $800 million worth of money the next day. Um, Accounts closed, done, and my partner and I and the rest of the desk that we worked on kind of sat around looking at each other like, okay, so what do we, back to the grindstone. Let's go. Let's start from zero. We're going to start. And we kind of thought that was the end of it. Little did I know, at that point, we got a call from Bank of America's counsel and said, hey, the attorney general wants to talk to you about this. And we said, okay. And now at this point too, I had just decided, I'm not sure if we talked about this in Chicago, but I had started running a couple of triathlons. So the one race I hadn't completed was the St. Croix half Ironman, and crashed my bike on the bike course about halfway through the bike course. So at this point, I'm in the middle of reconstructing my
Oh,
upper jaw, which is a more graphic story than any of your listeners need to hear.
out of
Putting my
curiosity, just because I do tries, did you hit something? You skid out? Like, how did you crash?
So the St. Croix Tri it's a half. So they ride you out 13 miles, and after 13 miles, you hit what they call affectionately the beast, which is a 12 to 14% 1 mile climb,
Oh,
switchbacks back and forth. And the island is basically, it's relatively flat until you hit that. So it's literally a flat straight ride at 25 miles an hour, which you're cranking and you're feeling great. And then you hit the beast and it's just a disaster. And we're ready for it. But what no one tells you training, and you guys have the same problem training, is this climb is, trying to train for this climb in the middle of March out here is just, roads are still frozen. You've got ice melt. You're not climbing. I would try to climb these hills and your tires would just spin and slip. And so you're ready for it, but you're training in 40-degree weather and you show up in St. Croix, it's 85 and humid. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but on the backside, and these roads are for nothing. They're just a lot of them are just semi-packed gravel. So on the way back, just one of the switchbacks, I'm doing, whatever it is, you're downhill, you're exhausted, not paying attention. And I missed a hairpin. And,
oh
and
no.
remember, I woke up in a ditch doing one of those, and the back of my glove was covered. And so it was, and let's just, St. Croix is a beautiful island. It doesn't have the best healthcare on the face of the planet.
Yeah, you missed this part, dude. You had a rough year.
So it was a rough year. So I've got the vet that literally the St. Croix vet has sewn up my lip, and I'm trying to put the teeth back together. And they're like, oh, by the way, you're indicted. The New York Attorney General wants to talk to you.
When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation.
myself and the attorney at the time representing me, we went downtown, and we need 45 minutes of your time. We got there, and 2.5 hours later, they would run into the conference room and slam the door, and then run out of the conference room, and you're lying, you don't believe you. So fast forward, on my beautiful wife and very tolerant wife's birthday, we were walking through Nature Center, and we got a phone call from Bank of America. It was my manager, the head of human resources for Bank of America, and the head of, I don't know, somebody else was on it, the private client group entirely. And they suggested that I take some time off, rather bluntly. So at that point, I was locked out of my computer. We were everything that I had on my desk was put in a box. I don't know what happened to that, but it was all my notebooks, all the evidence, everything that we had, gone. And I got a phone call the next day, which was fine. So fine, I had made an appointment to go talk to a an attorney in New York City about being let go, and hey, what can I recover? Because all my 401k was gone. We had a couple of private investments that were not fully vested, so all that just evaporated. And I remember we went in. I swam with the guys that I swam with in the morning. Came back out to Connecticut, and as I'm pulling into the garage, I got a call from Bank of America's attorney who had been helping me at the time. And I picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, what's going on? What are we doing?" And he said, "Well, I heard from the Attorney General's office." I said, "Oh, does he want to, does he want to sit down and talk again?" I mean, it was 3.5 hours worth of just yelling and screaming. He said, "No, they want to arrest you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. You are to turn yourself in 8 o'clock, 1 New York Plaza, and they're going to arrest you." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So talk about, and we're worried about cabinets being delivered on time. Like, oh no, we're going to push you guys out by a week,
Right.
and so it's all relative. So we went into the city. My wife and I went into the city and met with this guy who specializes in employment attorneys or employment matters. And he looked at me, and the word, I don't know how it got out or whatever it was, but apparently the word was out, because he looked at me and he said, "Son, you've got a much bigger problem on your hands." And I remember him making a couple of phone calls. One was, to the attorney that was going to represent Martha Stewart. I'm kind of glad we didn't get that guy. And another guy was representing WorldCom at the time, and then he ran out of leads. So we spent the rest of the day just trying to find somebody who could represent us, because I knew there's no way I'm going through this without an attorney involved. And B of A at that point had called me and said, "This is above anything that we can handle, that we should be handling for you. So we're stepping away." So
So basically, your general counsel for the company you worked with, their
yeah,
last call to you was, "You're going to get arrested, and oh, by the way, we're not going to represent you."
correct. 100%.
Awesome,
You're on your
awesome,
own.
awesome news.
Yeah,
Awesome news.
great, great, man. So, not to push you down the pit on a skateboard or anything, but here you go. So we spent the rest of the day, and I remember distinctly. We talked to a couple of people, and you're ready. You understand attorneys are expensive, but what you don't realize is that yes, they're expensive, but it's also a business in and of itself, right? So I remember sitting with one gentleman. He's like, "Well, we need." We'd love to represent you, but we need a retainer. I'm like, okay, we can probably handle that. Now, we had just gone to final, last, and best on the house. We're now in the house. We own this sucker. It's just the biggest thing with my wife and I. It's the dream house that we never could have even imagined. Either one of us never grew up with any of this. And I said, okay, well, what do you need for a retainer? And he said, 500. I said, 500 what? He said 500,000. And I said, well, wait, how does that work? He said, well, we keep that 500,000 and then we bill against it. And by the way, I'm a senior attorney, so you're going to want someone relatively senior, and I bill at $450 an hour, and just like my plumber. And and you're just absolutely blown away. It's like, by the way, there's probably two or three partners in the room at the same time with you. There's going to be, then we need legal assistance, and you can count on $10,000 a day worth of representation. Like, that's a pretty big number that we were there. We eventually did find someone. I spent the night with the help of a good family, very close family friend, and we found someone to represent us. And I showed up the next morning, and they put me in handcuffs.
Tell them, you got to tell them this. Tell them. Oh yeah, maybe get into that part where you're in the police car. Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
So that
We show up and so I showed up on as scheduled, 8 o'clock. They put me in cuffs, they fingerprint me, put me in handcuffs, they parade
were
me.
they like thank you for coming in and turn yourself in, or were they just kind of like how did they greet you exactly when you come in to get arrested?
You know what? Honestly, I don't even remember. It was
Yeah,
just I just remember being outside One New York Plaza, which I'm not even sure I could picture it in my head today.
right.
It was just such this whirlwind. Getting out of the car, coming in, they were waiting outside. They decided they were going to treat me respectfully and put handcuffs. They allowed me to have handcuffs in the front. I was like, that was mighty big of them. And they fingerprinted me through the process. They were polite. There was no violence. They were polite. We walked through the process. They put me in a holding cell for 20 minutes, brought me out, and then they put me in the back of the squad car. And they told me that it was time we were going to go for the court appearance. So the next thing you know, I'm sitting in the back of the squad car with these two retired New York City detectives that now work, as it turns out, work for Elliot Spitzer, the old attorney general. So they're sitting there and they're making small talk, and we're chatting, and they're talking about they've got their pension, and now this is their second pension, which is all well and good. That was probably 9:30 in the morning, and straight through around lunchtime, I'm still in the back of the car. They offered me some pretzels, which was which was nice.
What if you had to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, I don't. Thank God I didn't have a lot of coffee that morning, so it was one of those things. And I'm just petrified at this point. And I've been, the attorneys have told me, so I'm now in no tie, just a dress shirt, a pair of pants, and some loafers, and sitting in the back of this car with my hands handcuffed in front of me. And it's 2 o'clock goes by, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. It's 3:30, and now the system. I know the courts close at 4, so everything shuts down at 4. At 3:45 now, so I've been in the squad car for what was that 5-6 hours. It's insanity.
How often did you ask them like, "Hey, am I going to get out of here?" Or like
Yeah,
how did you handle that?
probably every hour. Like, guys,
Yeah.
what's going on? Oh, no, we're just waiting for word from our boss before we bring you in. We're waiting for the court to clear. Waiting for the judge. Like, can't we go in? No, we can't go in. Oh, we can't sit in the courtroom. No, we can't sit in the courtroom. We're staying in the back of the
And I
car.
assume they took your phone, like you can't call anyone or do anything.
Oh
You're
yeah,
just nice.
yeah. So nothing, no communication, no nothing. I have no idea what's going on. So eventually, at like 3:45, they open the doors and they get out. And I remember there's a lot of commotion outside the door. I didn't think anything of it until I started to walk up the stairs. And I remember distinctly at that point they actually had moved the handcuffs from in front to in back. So now I'm walking. This is the anomaly, and you kind of question that. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I remember them holding the handcuffs from behind and literally holding me back. And I realized at that point we had been waiting for all of New York City's press corps to show up and take pictures. So we had Associated Press and New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and everybody stacked into this little tiny two-door New York City courtroom to take pictures. And that's when I began to realize just what a big deal this was, and just what a nightmare this had started to become. We were scratching the surface. So they let us into the courtroom, and the previous law firm, the only guys that we could find, they were there, and I sat down next to one of the guys, and we didn't grow up with a ton of money. We grew up in an 18 something farmhouse in Massachusetts, and I remember my folks had their their second or third trip out of the country. My dad had cobbled together a bunch of funds, and they were in Italy. My folks were in Italy on vacation, and we had to call them in the middle of the night to tell them A, that I had been arrested, and B, we had no money for representation, and we needed to secure bail against their house because we had so little equity in our house. We couldn't access it. So that's a great phone call to have from your oldest son.
What did your parents say when they got this call?
I don't even know, because I had to have
Oh, sure.
I was detained at this point. So it was an interesting discussion. So we make it through the press corps. I sit in the courtroom. Finally, the name comes up, and just a sequence of events that is just insane. You realize just at this point also how railroaded I had been. So I stood up. We had, and the terms of the bail were $1 million bail secured with $100,000 cash, supposedly. Okay, fine. So we show up, we stand up in front of the court. Judge says, he calls my name. We stand up. My attorney stands up next to me and says, Your Honor, here we are. We plead not guilty to all charges. Okay. And the judge says, I understand you've prearranged bail. Is that accurate? Yes. Do you have the bail money? I said, yes. And at that point, we had a bank check. He held the bank check up and she said, the deal was for $100,000 cash. I said, well, you didn't really want the green bills. And she said, well, we want $100,000 cash. And that means cash money. And the firm that this is one of those moments, I'm like, no, not really. This is not happening. And the firm that we had hired to represent us said, no. I talked to the bailiff or the clerk this morning and we agreed. And the judge looks at my attorney at the time and said, oh, really? Who was that? I don't know. I said, okay.
Was he lying? Or
no, he had no idea.
He just didn't know who. Yeah.
He had no idea. So that was just a miss on that particular guy's representation, which was too bad. And at that point, the back door of the courtroom opens and I'm in the New York City Tombs for the evening. Which is,
this story's
and
awesome.
The Tombs, for those who don't know, that's the jail downstairs. So they literally open the back of the courtroom. You're in a 150 yard long hallway downstairs.
So you give your 1-year-old son a hug, your wife a kiss, and you walk down into the belly of the beast.
Literally into the belly of the beast, and it goes from these beautiful wooden paneled New York City courtrooms to this awful ceramic blocked 1950s corridors with bars. It's quite a contrast. So we go through a couple different bars. We make it downstairs. We make it into the holding cell. And it's probably, I don't know, if I had to guess, memory serves me, it's 15 by 15, 2 benches. There's a toilet and a sink. And there's probably 15, 20 guys in there. All positioned different spots. And there's a big, tall gentleman just kind of washing up in the sink. And he's talking to himself. And this guy's just jacked. I remember him having the T-shirt on, and he's jacked, he's ripped, and he's washing his pits, and it's just, I'm like, what is going on? Talking to himself the whole time. And I remember him saying, reaching outside kind of the little wall that separates the sink from the seat, this big wooden bench. And he starts talking to the guy next to me, saying, what are you in for? And I'd been well coached to say, release as little information as you possibly can. So they go around the room, and this guy's on minor drug possession, and this guy beat up his old lady. And the next question is, well, what's your bail? And these guys are like, it's $5,000. One guy was third strike for dealing heroin, and he was like, it's like, my bail's $25,000. And they're like, wow, that's a lot. So they make it around the room. And now, granted, at this point, I'm the only guy in a pressed white shirt, a blue blazer, and a pair of loafers. So,
what are you thinking? Are you just like shell shocked? Like, what's going through your mind right now?
Like, I'm like, what is happening here? Like, the good news is, I didn't at that point feel any danger. It was exceptionally uncomfortable. It was just such a weird environment that none of us, certainly, it's not something you'd expect to happen, certainly at the end of the day. And there's just a million thoughts swirling through your head at this point. So they make it around the room, and they get to me, and they're like, yo, Wall Street, what do you got? I'm like, I just in for, a bunch of white collar stuff. And they were like, oh, well, what's your bail? I was like, no. And they're like, what? I'm like, $1 million. And at that point, the whole room erupts and it's high fives. Yeah, you must have screwed up big. And I was like, yeah, thanks, boys. I appreciate it. So I don't know.
Was there a point that you thought about lying? Like, well, what point, what's going through your mind? Like, do I lie? Do I make it low? Do I change? Because you think like your number is like so far in excess of anyone else, like $5,000, $20,000, you're like $1 million. Like, where you thought like, what was it like? Did you just had, I'm just going to be honest here. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. Like, I had no idea. Like, I had no idea the relevance. Like, it was, certainly I had no idea that it was this weird Scarlet A or Scarlet Bale, for that matter, B for Scarlet Bale, right? I had no idea. And I guess, it was just, immediately it was this weird camaraderie, if you will. Guy next to me is the guy for dealing heroin. I forget, he had a shamrock tattooed on his throat. He had Seamus tattooed here and Patrick tattooed here, a couple teardrops on his eye. And yeah, he told me that when I get out and make bail, you gotta, or if I spend the night, I request Xanax, because you just take 3 Xanax and go to sleep and not worry about it. So it was all this really weird dynamic, unsolicited advice, but made it through the night. It was just really an unbelievable experience. Middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, the sirens go off, the alarms go off, all doors get slammed shut. Somebody had smuggled, marijuana into the jail, so decided it was a really good idea to get stoned in the jail. That didn't go over very well with guards. I was like, what is going on? So finally, my name got called. It was my wife had actually secured bail. I remember walking out, still in the same shirt, jacket. It smelled a little bit different than when I went in, and she met me outside, gave me a big hug, and it was the attorney that didn't remember the clerk's name, and next to her, and she gave me this big hug and whispered in my ear. She's like, "We've got a different lawyer. I've got it lined up," which was probably the best thing. At that point, I'm ready to explode. I have no idea how. I think I, at this point, understand the magnitude of what's going on, or at least I think I did. I understand it's a lot more serious than I.
Because they didn't bring forward charges yet. They just simply said
Nope.
you're arrested. Okay. Yep. So you really don't even know what's going on. You're in jail, but you still have no idea. Like, because everyone would say, well, like, why am I here? Like, what did I do wrong? Right. You still have no idea what that is.
Well, they've charged us with late trading is the answer, right? And this is all public, and this is late trading, and it was basically the trading strategy was that due to one of the loophole in the law that you're allowed to trade mutual funds up until the time of the posting of their value at the end of the day. So the market closes at 4 o'clock, and trading stops most trading stops at that point. However, because of the way that Wall Street, or at least at the time, settled out, the publication of that day's price for the mutual fund wasn't up until well past 4 o'clock on many occasions. So, and the loophole in the law, the way that the attorneys had interpreted it, had allowed that gap to be traded in. So that's kind of that understanding. And they called that late trading. And basically what they had charged me with was from any transaction that happened from the close of the stock exchange to when we executed a trade, they had charged me with theft in between that, which is a novel approach, hadn't been done before. And this was just something, this was in the back way up. It was Elliot Spitzer had just won. He just won a huge case against Wall Street, and he wanted their separation between the research side of the firm and the investment banking side of the firm, saying there was too much collusion between the two. In other words, that the consumer wasn't getting the real story because the analyst covering the stock was basically being paid to paint a rosy picture for their client. So that's kind of that background. So I make it out. We dismiss the current attorney. My wife whispers, "Hey, we've got a new attorney. We're going to go see it." Now, apparently what's happened while I was in jail is that we had to reach out to dear friends of ours and get them to go. We had to surrender my passport, which was at home. So we had to rely on friends of ours still in Connecticut to go into our house, into the special lingerie drawer, on the bottom, pull the passports out of the drawer, and then drive them down to Manhattan. And it's something still we joke about today. And it's
that's so funny. I hope every Christmas you get them a pair of lingerie as or April Fools. That'd be a great joke.
That's a really good idea. That's
right.
So we were in their house this afternoon, actually this morning. So so that's happened. And when my wife returns to this beautiful, but still empty house, because we have no furniture even. We just moved into this monstrosity. We're planning on buying couches and rugs and whatever else. And, it was a dead stop as soon as that retainer thing hit. So she's in their house, and apparently the phone is just ringing off the hook. It is. And the caller ID, just one after another, is New York Times, Associated Press, Washington Post. It's San Francisco Chronicle, one after the other, after the other. And in the mix, somehow my wife has the phone next to her. She sees the name of a dear friend of ours, and thinking it's a good family that we're friendly with, and she sees the name and she picks it up, thinking that it is a good buddy of mine. It turns out it's his sister-in-law, and she says, "Look, I've been following this." My wife knew who Lori was, and Lori said, "Hey, look, we've been following this. You guys are in deep doo doo, to put it gently. You need to reach out to this guy. This guy will take care of you. I went to law school with this guy." And Rhonda did. So Rhonda, forged my wife, turned around, called called John that next day, and John's like, "Hey, absolutely, we're interested. Let's meet the next day." And as part of this process too, stepping back, as we're interviewing firms, I mean, we're talking about, these guys are $500,000 worth of retainer. It's $10,000 an hour. These guys are talking millions of dollars worth of representation of money that we don't have. Like, it's just not there. We're 34 years old. We just bought the house of our dream. Every single penny that we had was going into this, and we're shut out. I just lost my job. She is not working. So there's no income, there's no nothing. So we hop in a cab and we head up, or I don't know, we took the subway. I don't even remember. I don't remember the pathway from one to the other. Um, but we go up to see this new law firm, and part of the issue was that, what happens if I can't pay? What happens if I can't get representation here? I just have to plead, which is the dirty little secret, unfortunately, for a lot of these prosecutors. They know that, look, you're the state of New York, you have endless resources behind you, and we're just going to drag this thing out forever, and you're eventually going to run out of money. So we're trying to figure this out. And we sat down in front of these guys, and a number of the attorneys we had talked to before were like, "Yeah, dude, you got to figure out how we're going to get paid, because we're not going to take you on without getting paid." So we sat down in front of the new law firm. We're in Midtown, and we're in this beautiful conference room, and they have something other than gruel to eat for the first time in like 24 hours, or pretzels, right? And so I sit down, and they approach the situation by saying, "Hey, look, we think we can get Bank of America. We think because you're an officer of the firm, we think that we can get them to pay your legal fees." And with that's literally that's all the encouragement we needed to hear. That's probably the best thing that's happened to us in probably 6 months, which is really great at this point.
So hey, when you say that, so it had been 6 months since you had
that's
been.
probably no. That's probably it's 3 months since we closed up the accounts.
Okay.
So it's
Yep.
3 months since we closed up the account. This is now probably late September, early October by the
Gotcha.
time we have this conversation.
That's just helpful context for
Yeah.
Yep.
Moving that through, and then we decide I go to one other law firm. Somebody reached out to me. I go on the way home. I go up there. I sit down in their office, and they were like, "Look, hey, this is the inside scoop. No. One of our partners went to school with Elliot, and here's the plan. We're gonna end run him and go directly to the Attorney General of the United States and look to settle, ink a deal with them." And I was like, "Well, but the Attorney General's not involved. There's no charges there on that level yet. So why would I reach out to federal charges if there's no federal charges?" No, don't worry, we got this. It's the stories that you and I come across every day. It's like, well, your competition gave us a bid that's 50% lower. It's on a piece of notebook paper, but don't worry, we got this. Like, right. we don't really know what we're doing, but we got this. And it's like, no, guys, that's just not the right strategy. So literally that afternoon, I circled back. We signed a retainer with this law firm, and that's I don't know. It's a turning point in this.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. If you're still chasing checks and juggling spreadsheets, it's time to upgrade. Adaptive is revolutionizing how builders get paid with AI-powered bill pay, automated draws, one-click payments, and built-in lien waivers. Faster payments, fewer headaches, and total visibility. Adaptive takes care of the back-end chaos so you can focus on what you do best, building. We've used Adaptive for 2.5 years and trust them to keep our projects moving and payments flowing. Learn more at adaptive.build and simplify the pay process today. For more information, you can also listen to episode 10 and episode 15.
Now, at this point too, right before I left the bank, we had a bunch of triathlons that we had done. My partner and I, we had done some really cool stuff. We done Alcatraz, and I did St. Croix on Better. And just because it's the nature of the beast, I decided to sign up for the Lake Placid Ironman. So, so in the midst of this, we're looking for cash. The Lake Placid was, I forget at the time, it was like $800 to sign up. So I call over to Lake Placid. I'm not home, just trying to figure out, the lawyers are trying to figure out where they stand with Elliot Spitzer and where the whole process is headed. I'm home. I make a call into Lake Placid. They're like, look, I'm sorry. I'm like, guys, look, I was just arrested. I got this. Blah. And they're like, look, I'm sorry. We got a straight no cancel policy. Okay. So at that point, it's at that point I hop on the bike and I just start, right? It's just, let's just go.
So I have a question, just that we know where we started the episode too, is like, so I'll maybe do a few check-ins. So, cause I think, fast forwarding, you and I chatted about this. I asked you, well, I'll ask you again, how important to your mental and physical health in retrospect, and at the time, did you realize it, was training for the Ironman during all these incredible external elements that were happening to your life?
Well, I think it was immensely important is the answer. It was the answer that kept me upright, frankly. I looked at it, and I think when you and I talked in Chicago, the phrase that I use all the time. I had two choices. I could crawl down the bottom of a bottle very easily, or focus on it otherwise. I had a wife that was incredibly supportive. I had a great family network that we had, family and friends that we had leaned on. The support from the community we got letters, we got emails, some pretty quirky letters from out of I don't even know where. We've got them someplace, but just, conspiracy theorists abound. It was pretty amazing. But training for the Ironman, it was one of the things that really allowed me to focus. And most importantly, I knew I had a 1-year-old son at home at the time. And whether he remembers it or not, like I know he remembers being at a couple different races. But for me, that was my motivation to stay on track. Really, you take all your frustrations out on the bottom of the pool, on the road, on the pedals. And I had some really aggressive swims. I
mean, some aggressive swims.
It was brutal. But to come out of the pool or come off the bike or come off the road and be just absolutely exhausted was immensely important. It allowed me, and at the time, fortunately, it's my wife at this point has found another job, so she's returned to work, and then I'm in charge of our son. So I've got a 1-year-old who doesn't like to sleep, but fortunately, it was one of those things. I'd come home at I'd get up in the water at 5, and I'd come home at 7. And just then my day started taking care of him and dealing with whatever legal stuff we needed to happen. So it was and I don't think I can overstate how important it was. It was what kept us whole. And fast forward all the way through, a spoiler alert, we went to trial, all the way through the end of this. It was immensely important. It was really one of those things.
I mean, I wanted to bring a highlight to it. We won't go now because I want to stay on the story, but just, the balance. I mean, so people sometimes ask, like, on social media, like, why do we post? Like, there's a huge group like boot camp, sauna camp, some of this wellness stuff that we've gotten into. And this is a big reason why none of us have experienced what you're experiencing, but in some ways it doesn't matter. Like, everyone's hard is hard. And like, you don't kind of know what you're capable of. And part of the reason for sharing the story is like, people are way more capable of handling things than they can realize. Part of it is like, it just is what it is. Like, you're in the hard, and there's, like you said, it's bottom of the barrel, bottom of the bottle, or it got to get through it. It's not really, and sometimes I'm sure you look back and you look at this and you're like, well, it's not like you had a lot of options. It was like forward or stop, and stop's not really an option.
Stop, and that's the important part. I think you bring it back. The stop is not an option, because at that point it's a full stop. Well, and now you're leaving the people with all this support system. I mean, granted, this has been, in the grand scheme of things, this has only been it's been 2 or 3 months at this point. But like, at full stop, you're just giving up on everybody else. I've got so much. My folks were there, my brothers were there, my my beautiful wife, more importantly. Like I can't leave
Do you,
that hanging.
so are we back to the story? Are we at the part where the guy was like eating the bagel and you were kind of like, what's going on? Like
Yeah.
that part, I just remember that being really funny.
Yeah.
And then why don't we pick up there and
No,
kind of launch
let's
into
pick up
like
there.
where, yeah.
So we hired the law firm, and then an important part reading into that is I remember there was a great guy, member of the law firm, who was going to lead, take the lead in the courtroom. John Gallagher was his name, and I remember him coming back from one of these meetings with Elliot's team, and just looks at me and says, I've never experienced a bigger bunch of a-holes in my whole entire life. I can't wait to rip this guy's eyeballs out. Like, he goes, I am going to fight. It's going to make me so excited to ruin this guy's day. And I'm like, that's the guy I want. That is the guy I want. I want you. Unfortunately, he went home like 2 weeks later. He went home after a meeting, had a massive headache. And then 3 weeks later, he was checked into Sloan Kettering and basically was in hospice after 4 weeks.
Oh,
He
no.
passed away of a brain tumor, massive brain tumor, just left. And it's just one of those, it breaks your heart for his family. I don't, at that point, and that also, like, talk about putting stuff into relative importance. It's, somebody said to me going through this, they're like, look, if you do end up going away for a little bit, I was like, what? Well, what do you mean going? Like, if you end up in jail, if you end up in prison, then it's not the end of the world. You can restart, which, again, talking about relatives, everybody's heart is hard. The hard part about doing things, I'm 3/4 of the way through the book. It's amazing. But it's like everybody's heart is hard. But then you hear the story of this guy, John, who literally lost his life to something that's uncontrollable, this massive cancer that comes out of nowhere. That really puts it in perspective. So here we are. I've hired this law firm. I've now, and I don't remember at this point, I think I'm actually indicted at this point. So the Attorney General's office has actually produced, after much starting and stopping, it's now like 6 months we've gone through this thing where they've dragged this out. I remember it distinctly. Like, it takes forever for any of these guys to do anything. And they've every time we show up in court, it's a different set of charges. It's brutal. So we are now, John passes and I'm indicted, and we have to find different representation because it's a
When,
real.
when do they level the boom on the number? When does that enter the story? Like the
This
amount?
is right now.
Okay.
This is so literally. I'm sitting in a room, and we have a couple different choices of new counsel. We want people with at this point, we all realize, and to give you a magnitude of what we're talking about mentally, I've gone from, geez, this is going to screw up the rest of my month. And we sat in this initial attorneys meeting, and I said, hey, somebody told me that this could take 6 months to clear up. And I remember one of the attorneys who I'm still friendly with looked at me and he laughed, and he was like, 6 months, but this could take 6 years. I'm like, whoa, hang on a second. And he was like, yeah, this is, and that was the nail on the coffin on what a big deal this was. So now we need to find courtroom representation, and we go outside the court. We have two choices, and I ended up with this gentleman. I was like, yeah, look, let's just pick Paul, and Paul's going to be good. So I'm sitting in the conference room waiting to meet my new representation, and this crazy guy walks in, and he's just got this big head of hair, and he's got the sweater vest done all the way to the top, and he's eating a bagel, and it's falling down the front of his shirt, and he kind of gives me the Columbo look. Yeah, Mr. Sihpol, I can't believe what a pleasure it is to meet you. I look at the attorney, who's just a good buddy of mine, this guy John, who is now acting as point. Who is this guy? He's like, this is your new lead counsel, dude. And he's got bagel coming down, and he said, I'm so honored to meet you. I can't believe this. I've never been anybody that's stolen $2.3 billion.
Wait,
What?
$2.3 billion.
2.3 billion. I'm like, what? He's like, what? No one's told you? And I'm completely lost at this point. I don't know who this guy is, what he's talking about, or where the 2.3 billion. And he's like, that's the number they've charged you with in your indictment. That's the total amount. Those are the total amount of charges that you've been charged with. So 2.3 billion is the number. It still makes my head itch as soon as when I do it. And so that Paul turned out to be just a godsend, and he was one of those guys. He's one in a million, and just the right person had the right room at the right time to represent me. And one important fact too, just backing up in between all of this, in between signing a retainer with this new law firm and John Gallagher passing away, we had Bank of America was not releasing any information to us. They weren't telling us anything. It was a total hard stop, and we knew. But the attorneys said that Delaware, they were registered as a Delaware corporation, and being an officer of the firm, Bank of America was obligated to pay my legal fees, at least until proven guilty. But they wouldn't release any of this. So we literally, back to my folks, we borrowed $60,000 from my dad. We hired Delaware counsel. So now this is my third counsel. So this is on top of my regular counsel. Now I've got these guys in Delaware that are representing us. They brought it. They filed I don't even want to. They filed a motion in court in Delaware to bring B of A to the table. And fortunately, as one of my attorneys was getting on the Acela to go down and represent us in court, we got a call from B of A's attorneys and just basically said, "Hey, look, you're right. We have to pay you. Let's not drag this through court because we're going to lose. We know we're going to lose. We have to pay you." So at that point, the important part is at that point, literally, the B of A just said, "Whatever you need from a financial perspective, you're good." And at that point, the first law firm, I think we scraped together a $10,000 retainer, the loan for the $60,000 for Delaware court. We got it. So we got all that money back. So all of a sudden we have at least a glimmer of hope here.
And I can't only imagine. I mean, it's a little bit like the guillotine is away from your neck a little bit, from the standpoint that like you're facing these terrible things, but on top of it, you realize that if you can't pay for this, the noose gets tighter faster. And by the way, you don't have a job because you can't have a job. You're in court all the time.
100%.
So I mean, they're taking away your ability to actually make money. I mean, what a terrible, helpless feeling that would be.
You're stuffed. And I remember having a pretty blunt conversation with counsel, and he was like, "Look, if you can't pay for this, we're going to come after you."
You're like, get in line. Hey, you're gonna have to be a long line because there's so many people that want a piece of me.
100%. They were like, "Oh, by the way, the skyscraper Bay of A's headquartered in, they're going to come after you because you're violating the lease because you were convicted." And I was like, "Come on, stop it." But at that point, I'm like, "Look, what else have I got to lose? Like, bring it." I don't. At this point, the financial aspect of it, I'm like, I don't.
Was there at any point that you like laughed as a reaction? I'm thinking of like, I've always thought it was kind of sort of this funny, like if you're on a beach and like 100-foot tsunami wave was coming at you and you look up and you realize like no matter what you do, you can't outrun this wave. Yeah. So like you just kind of like laugh at it. Cause like, what else are you going to do? Like, did that ever happen?
It happened when people were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you got indicted." Well, the indictment actually, so little known fact, when the indictment happens, then actually the clock starts ticking. So now they have to take action. So they literally, and counsel, these guys were great. So they prepped me. They said, "Look, worst case scenario is they charge you with 2 counts because then they can drill down and focus on those true counts. And then we're really going to have to do our homework. Then it becomes much more difficult for the jury to stray or whatever. It's a much more difficult situation." He said, "What they'll probably do is charge you with 30, 40 counts because that looks better in the paper. And they're going to say, that's got a total prison time attached to it of 30, 40 years. So they charged me with 50 counts.
You're like, underachiever, like, I'm getting 50.
Yeah. And then we just had to laugh, and I'm in court. And I remember, we're in court. My wife and I are in court and we come outside. And again, the relative importance of all of this, and it's the soundbite world that we live in. We come out of court and CNBC's there and we're trying to get in the freaking car and CNBC's got the camera and they, say something. And the lawyers are pushing me in the back, like, "Get in the car. Don't you dare say anything." So that's all kind of a background. But once that, and I remember to your point, like just standing there, like how insane this whole process is. I remember going through the center console of my truck and scaring up $1.25 worth of quarters so that I could buy a slice of pizza on the way home. Like, and that's the cash flow that we had. Like, I had $1.25 to my name at the time and kind of taking care of this. So it was pretty amazing. That was where we were in the whole process. It was mind boggling. So, near and dear to my heart too is like, we've done not a ton of work, but where I can in creating the business we've done, the food bank is near and dear to my heart. Like, it's no one should go hungry in this country. And anyway, that's a different diatribe altogether. So we meet Sheckman. We meet him. He's just this absolute character representation. It's worth noting, we were going through this process. This is now probably a year into the process. I got another 2 years to go, which we'll try to condense. But not once did this guy spell my names right on his folder. It was just complete every time. It was spelled differently and wrong. He'd walk into the court. He's character, and they loved him. He's tough not to like. He'd walk into the courtroom and set alarms off because he had his phone still in his pocket. The bailiffs would laugh. The security guards, "Go ahead, Mr. Sheckman, you're good." He'd walk through the things. He's quite a character. But we, the other part.
What was, out of curiosity, and we'll find out a little bit later when you get to the courtroom stuff, what was his superpower? If you were to describe him as like, he can't remember your name. He's kind of a, Columbo-esque, as you will, and he's kind of fumbling around. Like, what was his superpower? He obviously was amazing at what he does. Like, what was it?
Absolutely amazing, and he could talk to and relate to anyone, really. And that was just you like this guy no matter what your ethnic background was, religious background. He was just affable. That's all he was, and you knew he just had this. He was amazingly smart, knew how to relate to people, and yet you never had the sense that he was too smart for you to talk to.
It was very approachable,
very super approachable. You mentioned it, but when we went to trial, he would get up in front of the jury. The jury would be so excited to hear from this guy, and he just no, moving on. He knew the questions to ask. He knew the questions, most importantly, not to ask, and that was a really, really important part. So we hired him. The other real point of I think the real turning point for us was obviously winning the lawsuit against B of A to write this check. The other turning point, I remember sitting in our kids' playroom. Our oldest was sleeping upstairs, and my wife were on the phone with this guy Sheckman, and then 4 or 5 other people from our law firm. And they said, "Look, we're getting close. This is probably now, I forget, it's probably December, late November, December timeline. So right about now." And he said, "Look, if we're going to do this, all right, we've got a June date in court, and we need to know because we need 4 to 6 months to prepare for this thing." So I remember sitting in my kids' playroom. We were on the phone. My wife is, we're on the other landline phone at the time, and having a conversation with him. And he was like, "Look, you guys need to make the decision." I was like, "Look, financially, it doesn't matter, right? We've already discussed that. We're already in." And he said, "This is a really big deal." He's like, "If you have to go away," we talked about spending time. If I had to spend time in Rikers, there are good work programs in Rikers. I was like, and there's like, you say Rikers and I'm out. Like, I hold on, and we had tried to settle this with the Attorney General's office. And like, "Look, we'll charge you with an felony, and then you need to testify." And I was like, "Well, great. You need to take jail time off the table." Like, no. So they wouldn't take jail time. So settling this was out.
Because they really wanted, to sum it up, they wanted the headlines. This was kind of a political, whatever we read. We see, this is like a movie, right? This is a book. This is, it's what makes the story, and one of the reasons why I wanted to share it, other than the mental health angle and the resilience angle, is like, you're literally someone I know that has had like a movie story-esque thing happened to them that it's in fact, what's funny, a little time out here, I think I told you about it, you wouldn't care. 3 of the people that heard your story, like, it wasn't that they didn't believe you, but they were a little skeptical. So while we're sitting at dinner, while you and I are, where I'm just like in trance with Mike Weaver, while I'm just like, it was Nick Schiffer. Nick goes, "I don't know," and he's from the East Coast, right? He's, "I'm way more believing. I'll believe anything." And he's like, he's like asking ChatGPT, like basically fact checking everything. Yeah, he did. And him and Trapper are like looking at it, and they're like, "Dude," because they had all heard the story the day before, and they're all watching me just like, Mark is in it right now. He is so deep into this story. Like I had all these host responsibilities. Like I was supposed to like talk, like meet sponsors, and it kept people, not my handlers, but people kept coming. And I'm like, if you interrupt me, I will literally throw you out in the snowstorm. Like I cannot not finish this story. I was so locked in. Anyway,
that's a funny sidebar. I didn't know that. And tell Nick I'm going to come up to White Oak Shade. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we will.
That's great. But it's just one of those things you can't fathom, and at this point too, the whole process of what happens behind the scenes and jury consultants. And because we had this we had the ability to finance this thing through B of A. We did mock trials. We did a trial with me in a suit. We did a trial with me in a shirt. And all the while, I'll get out of the pool and I'm training for Lake Placid at this time, right? So it's literally like the race is in a couple of weeks here. And, I haven't begun, I'm just starting into my taper. So Saturday morning, it's like I've got 8 hours worth of stuff, right? I'm like, I've got a full hour and change in the pool. And then I hop on the bike and then I run whatever it is. He's like, hey, by the way, you got a 13-mile run later this afternoon. So I show up to some of these sessions. I'm spent and dehydrated, and I'm locked in a room with this ex-prosecutor teaching me how to be cross-examined, which was brutal. Like that's just another side story we don't need to go into. Like weeks of cross-examination.
And their job is to break you, right? I mean, their whole job is to basically find any weakness they can or fabricated lie, basically just try to rough you up.
Yeah, it's exactly 100%. And it's literally you find the broken rib and you continue to poke and you just poke and poke until you have tears running down your
face. And is that training for you mentally, or is that training for your team? Because most of the time it seems like the defendants don't ever actually get have their testimony ever taken. So what is the point of that?
The point is in case you needed to, and you needed to be as prepared as possible. And we did through the mock trials. We kind of went through that. Like, hey, you know what? Do I present as credible? And to whom? And am I more credible in a suit? Am I more credible in a jacket and an open shirt? And the feedback was pretty cool. I remember it was very useful for this. And this is, those were, I don't know what they were, but we went through 3 or 4 of them. I remember the most uncomfortable one they had. They insisted that I wear like makeup or foundation because when I blush or when I get angry, I do one of these things. And they're like, no, and I just remember just all I could think of, you fast forward years later, it's like the Rudy Giuliani, like the drip down the side. I'm like, I can't touch my face. I can't touch my face. I can't touch my face. They were like, how uncomfortable? Like I was so uncomfortable in the whole thing with just the foundation and the makeup. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Out. I won't do it. They're like, no, but Broadway actors do it all the time. I'm like, dude, I'm not. No. Stop it.
So funny.
Yeah. Don't tell my framers I said that ever. So that's, we fast forward and I remember so we're now in the basement. We have this conversation and he's like, look, you know what? This is the real deal. And Spitzer at the time he's still Attorney General and his cloud is just building and building and building. He's getting more and more popular. He's press conference every single day. And he's out there stumping, saying that when I get convicted, he's going to show up in trial personally. And he's going to ask for consecutive terms. So if all of these 50 charges come together, I'm going to have to serve 5, then 5, then 5, not 5 all in conjunction with each other. But,
because he's grandstanding. He wants to come off as a tough guy, clean up New York, elect me, that kind of thing.
This is it, and he's at this point, he's caved, Wall Street, the research has caved to him. He's put Arthur Andersen out of business. He's threatened to put B of A out of business
because that was something that you didn't come up that I recall now. Because didn't he early on before B of A was going to represent you, didn't he call B of A and say, if you represent him, I'm coming after you? Like he basically, he threatened them. No. Yeah. And he said, and then.
Yep. No, he literally, that was part of this settlement process. And when B of A called us and we were getting on the Acela train, B of A disclosed, they're like, look, he told us he was going to put us out of business just like he did with Arthur Andersen if you pay your legal fees.
Because at the end of the day, he wanted to bring you out on a limb, knowing that if he could cut off your funds, 100%. You would eventually get to a point where you had to plead guilty. He would get what he wanted, and away you go. So
yeah, it was incredible.
Wow,
just brutal. And there's the dirty little secret. We were I look at it, there were a couple other people that were involved in this that didn't have that capability, that worked for firms that were overseas that didn't have this clause. So now these guys are fighting they're fighting this fight all on their own. And at a certain point, you're just like, I can't, I literally don't have the funds to do this anymore. And that
Now,
stinks.
did you ever have to sell your house, or did you sell your house, or
But
at what point? How did that all? When did that enter the
yeah, it
story?
was just brutal. It was just, I mean, anybody who's ever owned a property knows, you buy something in the go-go hours of mid-June in the spring in Connecticut, you're paying up there for that. And you need to sell this thing in the middle of February where there's no leaves on the trees, and you need to liquidate this thing. It was not pretty. We took a huge hit on that. The good news is we were able to cobble together something. We literally bought the lowest price house in town, which turned out to be a condominium. That was a great thing, because we looked at it. My wife and I looked at it like, look, do we move out of town, or we stay here? But we stayed for the education. And we knew, at that point, I talked about starting this business. We were doing a couple of side jobs when I can here and there, just, a deck or whatever, to just to have any cash flow that we possibly could. But we knew to stay in an area with an income and an education system like this was incredibly important to us. So we had liquidated the house. We took a huge hit,
Yeah.
and my wife now returned back to work.
Yeah.
And we had my mom would come down and babysit my son when we could. And we had incredible cooperation where and when we could. It was pretty fortunate. So
So, so you're back to, you basically says, hey, is this go or no go? We need 6 months
yep,
to prep for it. And your response was
let's go.
no. Yeah.
Let's go. I don't, I'm not caving to their demands. And now I've got my backup. There's really no, and I look at it, there's no downside here. Like, what, okay, great. So you're going to make me go to prison if I settle, most likely, or I'm going to go to prison. They're like, well, but the prison time is prison time, and year in prison is a lot different than 6 years in prison. And I don't know. It's just at that point we were like, let's go. And Rhonda looked at me, I looked at her, and I said, are you on board? And said, yeah. And we spent the next couple months prepping for trial. And then, you fast forward May something or whatever it was. Here it is, locked and loaded. And the next thing you know, I'm in a conference room outside Courthouse Square in Manhattan with 8 attorneys, and I'm in a suit ready to walk across the square. It's just, and in typical New York City fashion, it was absolutely classic. We're walking across the square, and I'm in the middle and surrounded by probably 8, 10 attorneys. Everybody's got a briefcase on, and guy comes up out of the subway and goes, "Yo, who y'all? Who?" And I don't know who it was. Somebody was like, "Nah, don't worry about it. Don't worry." He goes, "Now I know you, somebody." He's like,
Yeah.
"Who you?" It's just, and it was just this surreal moment as he came up out of the subway. We're working across the square. It's this beautiful May day, and there's a whole bunch of little ladies doing tai chi in the square. And it's one of those things you just don't forget it. It's emblazoned in your mind. But we went through an 8-week trial, which was just an unbelievable experience. It was just one of those things where, we were very fortunate to have the bank fund all of our operations. So we had this big giant display screen that was driven by a computer, and it was all great, PowerPoint slides and everything else. And the prosecution had an overhead projector, which was just unlike we would stand up, and turns out my trading counterpart had been locked in a room by the prosecution. The family office had agreed to cooperate. They agreed to pay a fine, agreed to cooperate. And this poor guy had been locked in an office for 6 months, unraveling all of these trades, and just so that they could get all of these charges produced going down this thing. It was just this absolutely surreal thing. And we would show up every day in court. We'd wait in line, and I'm in my suit, and my tie, and Rhonda's dressed up in, her jacket or their dress or something. And we're with, New York City, everybody, everybody is in line, from all those guys in the cell to traffic tickets to spousal abuse to everything else. And it was really an unbelievable experience. And the thing that we remember most is the bailiffs at the front they're nice. These guys are incredibly tolerant. They're like, oh no, sir, you can go through the lawyers, the attorney's gate is there. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, we're a defendant. I was like, but we're waiting in line. I've got my iced coffee, and I'm still trying to cool down from being, on the 4 train downtown. And I remember one gentleman, he approached me, and he's got the flat brim straw hat around. He's got the blue and red ribbon around the top of it, like the barbershop quartet hat. And it's probably the nicest suit I've ever seen anybody wear. And he looked at me and he said, Mr. Sihpol, Mrs. Sihpol, he's like, I just want to let you know there's a lot of people pulling for you, and it's going to be okay. And he turned around and walked away. We have no idea who this guy is to this day. No idea. But it was just one of those really weird, quirky things that kind of keeps you going. But being in courtroom, and we were in the court for 8 weeks, and we finally, they came back with a verdict. I think
before you announce that,
yeah.
You got to go back to my favorite part of the whole story. I think you were going to skip it. We got to go back. Is the board, the hand drawing? Yeah. That's my favorite.
Okay. So we're in court. We go through the whole process, and we call a number of attorneys or a number of witnesses. The prosecution calls obviously my trading counterpart. They call the head of the family office that were there, and it actually turns out going. They ask him, would you ever do anything illegal? You're one of the most outstanding families in the city. Would you ever? No, absolutely not. And the prosecution was just left dumbfounded by that answer. Like, here it is. This has actually worked in our favor. We called my old manager to the stand, who just went up there and was a cooperating witness in just the 2 great moments. One that you just referred to, but he gets up there and he just tells an untruth. We'll call it. He just lies through his freaking teeth. I'll call it what it is. He just, look, Ted brought, I went out to lunch with Ted. He explained this process to me, and it was so illegal, and I couldn't believe he was doing this, and blah, blah, blah. We refused to cross-examine him. We let him go. We're like, no more questions. And as he's walking out, I remember Sheckman standing up and just presenting this binder that's this thick. And he said, these are all the trades that Mr. Brown has talked about before, and then including, the months before and the months after. None of those trades fit with what Mr. Brown just said on the stand. And he kind of stuttered as he walked out of the courtroom. And the jury's just now transfixed on Sheckman, right? He goes, this is death. Here, they're all here. You're all here, Your Honor. And the jury's just pinned to this guy. So we make it, we prosecution rests, we stand up, we submit this binder and to the court. And then, so we enter into closing arguments. And in closing now, we've got a whole team in the back, all technology. We've got PowerPoints. We've got 4 or 5 clerks, and all these guys do is just produce anything that we want. So big presentations, or they go through, they can pull up every email that I've ever sent for the last millennium. They've got it at their fingertips. And Sheckman walks in for this presentation. At the end now, prosecution gives theirs. And he stands up and he stands and he's got literally this. He walks in with an easel. I don't know where he got it to this day. And he's got a piece of CVS like poster board and a black Sharpie, like the big fat one that you outline the island on, right? It's where like going through the kitchen island. It's like, here it is. And he stands up and he writes and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, you should be honored to be in the courtroom today, because there are 3 people in the history of mankind, and I'll take you through them. There's 3 people. There's Ferdinand Marcos, deposed dictator of Nicaragua. There's Saddam Hussein, dictator. And my client, Mr. Sihpol, he goes, they've all been accused of stealing over $2 billion. $2 billion, and my client's one of those 3 people. And the jury starts to laugh. And almost on cue, prosecution slams both hands on the table, objection. And the judge just takes his glasses and he lays down. He goes, sit down. And I was like, there it is. Like, and that's Sheckman. Like, Sheckman would stand up, and the poor jurors went through just weeks of overhead presentation, just one trade after another, so that they could submit the evidence, one trade after another. And at some point in the trial, Sheckman just stood up. He goes, Your Honor, we did it. We did every single trade. Mr. Sihpol got paid for a living to do trades. That's what he did. And prosecution's like, no, we'd like to go through them all. And the jury I just remember totally dejected. And Sheckman kind of looked over the jury. He's like, I tried just. So it was, and so we presented the literally on the easel. He's like, "Look, you know what?" And I forget what the exact. All I remember is that moment where, like, Mr. Sihpol being accused of stealing $2.3 billion. Everybody objecting. They went in and they came back with 11-1 to acquit on 29 of 33 counts. So there was one juror that went into the jury room, and basically this person said if he wasn't guilty of something, they wouldn't have charged him.
Oh boy,
It was
that's
like,
wild.
well, it was wild. So we, ultimately we settled. I agreed to walk away from the industry, and here we are. But I guess, to bring it full loop, it's, I just remember just at that point, just like, oh my goodness, the moment came. They announced the jury. We, just like on court TV, you stand up, you're standing at the end there, and the jury begins to filter out, and the jurors, thank you. Yeah, I said thank you to all of them. Or at least try to make eye contact. Thank you, thank you. I was doing fine, and I turned around and I looked back, and my lead attorney John had a tear rolling down his eye. Rhonda had started to cry. I'm like, oh shit! I was like, and I just bawling, standing at the table, just uncontrollably. Just this massive release of emotions for, I don't know what it was, for the last 3 years of my life. We were at a dead stop.
I
And
mean,
then the good news is we decided to get into this crazy business.
yeah, and then you started to become a in the world of construction and remodeling. Well,
Yes.
I mean, that was. I mean, we're going to talk about that at the next episode when we do one more a deep dive on your practice. But I mean, a big part of it was this was something you could do on the side in between trials. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it started right. Didn't you? You were helping a friend, and then you started doing it more and more and more, and then I mean, you kind of. I mean, everyone has a path into construction. Yours is just really, really dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mine's like the yellow brick road with a lot of bumps on it, right? But
yeah,
it's yes. And it was dear friends of ours at the time, actually the folks that went into the lingerie
the
drawer.
lingerie
The
drawer.
lingerie drawer.
Yeah,
She was like, look, this was 2003 in Connecticut, so it was the go build. Everybody was building it. Every GC was building a spec house,
right.
and if you were undergoing a renovation, you were second or third to their two spec houses that they were building. So they just said, hey, look, we've seen the finish work you've done in your own house when you fix it up. Why don't you come, do the finish work? And I remember the second or third week where the guy just didn't bother to show up for the subcontractor appointment. I remember driving in the driveway and she's crying, just bawling because there's no GC. The electrician's there. He's angry, yelling because he doesn't have any plans or nobody has the plans on site. And I said, come on, this can't be that difficult. I'm sorry to every lighting consultant that's out there, but let's go figure out where we need to put the lights and we'll do this. Let's do this.
When it's interesting, and maybe it's just because I am in construction as you are, but when I hear this, I love analogies. But the way you build a construction home team for high-end remodels or custom homes, or honestly any team,
Yeah.
is very similar to your challenge, whatever the challenge is. The challenge might be budget. The challenge might be topography. Might be neighbors. Might be a variance. Might be your cash flow. I mean, regardless, you're assembling a team. I mean, you went through 3-4 different councils before you found Checkman,
Yep.
and and some of them on the way helped you, Bank of America and whatnot. And like, I just think of like, people that we interview with. I was thinking, excuse me, if someone was to ask me like, what are some stories that of hurdles that you've overcome? Like our memory goes to like maybe clients that got away that we didn't get or but through it all, we're doing hard things makes you a better person, makes you a better business owner, assuming you can get through them, obviously.
Yeah.
And it also offers a ton of perspective. Like, I think it's easy to read, let's say, like Aesop's Fables, or I just got the book the other day because someone recommended it. I think it's Marcus Aurelius's like Thoughts or whatever. So like basically these philosophers are like Zhang Tzu, The Art of War. And where I'm going with this is because I'm going into the holidays and I do a lot of reading during this time. Is just like, no one became really a wise man without going through some real deep crap. And like,
yeah, you need a pretty big fan.
Yeah. And so like, looking back now, I mean, what advice would you have even for yourself or for others listening, like when they're facing their hard moments? I mean, your story kind of speaks for itself, but what sort of perspective do you have now? Because that was 20 years ago now.
That's 20 years ago.
That's a long time ago. How does that inform kind of your resilience or your mindset today?
I think, number one, nothing is as hard as that was. But we're literally in this business. It's, and we go back to that Friday night contractors coalition, right? We've all got that one client that just goes off reservation, and there's no rhyme or reason, completely irrational. And unfortunately, we're gonna, we've all got that. Oh, I'm going to mediation, or I'm going to arbitration, or this guy owes me $200,000, or whatever it is. But you kind of step back, and that's how my conversation with Trapper started. It's just we're listening to this, and I was like, I like, my goodness, listening to this thing. I'm in the middle of a mediation right now, and this is nothing compared to building a house where I wanted to take my own life. Like, it's not there, and I think that just the biggest thing that I did throughout the process, you just literally take it. You take it in. You can't take it all in because it's trying to swallow a fire hose. But if you take one cupful or whatever you can handle at a time and put one foot in front of the other and find that release. And it does, I don't know, that release isn't for everybody in the bottom of the pool. It's not on the bicycle. Hopefully it's not on a bottle, but you know, you do a cooking class. I don't know what it is. Go out and throw the ball with the kids and step away for a second and realize, just take a look at the surroundings and realize that this is handleable. We like to think about, we've all started a project, and I was reading something or listening to a podcast the other day. It's like we've all got that one project or projects at the start where we'd love to go back and revisit and redo something that we did. But you take that one step at a time. It's like, okay, so maybe I would have done this assembly a different way, but this is much the same way. It's how take just take what you can handle and put that in perspective, because hopefully nothing is worth taking that the ultimate step. It's not. And there are always resources, hopefully, that go find it. And I think was it in Chicago, the 6 minutes did this come up. It was something else, and we were talking about a mental health issue, and someone was saying a good friend of theirs was going through a process, and they were in a meeting, and the friend called and said, hey, I need you. And he was in the middle of a meeting, and didn't pick up. And it wasn't until later in the day.
Oh,
And I made it have all the facts, but effectively he got back to this person, and the person said, you know what, I had a really tough time and ended up in a really dangerous spot. And the statistics, I think, are that most people need 6 or 8 minutes. He said, so going forward, there's a code where between him and all of his closest friends, where it's as simple as a text.
so
6 minutes.
you know who that is? That's Simon Sinek.
Is it?
So
Yes.
yeah, it was on Instagram. The last 3-4 months, it's been going everywhere, and I remember seeing that because he shared that story where his friend and. Stereotypically, men aren't as good at asking for help.
Yeah.
Whether it's a stereotype, whether it's true or not, or whether we just keep saying it is, it's hard to know. It doesn't matter. The point is reach out. And I think it goes both ways. I think if you are someone that you know your friend group and like it crosses your mind, like just call them. What's the worst that they're doing okay? Or you just check in, you talk to your friend, no big deal. And if they really are in a difficult place, then you can be there to help them out. Most people just want you to listen to them. They just want to know that they're not alone, that they need to share. And it's very cathartic. I mean, just to share.
And look, demolition helps too. To do to do some demo work yourself.
I like your comment. What did you say? You let not demons in the pool. How did you phrase that? When you were
Left a lot of demons in the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, that's what it was. A lot of demons in the bottom of the pool.
But that's totally accurate.
Yeah.
And I think just really don't bite off more than you can chew. You can do this. I know you can. Like I know you can get through it. I know. And look, you're staring at. I've got $1.25 in my pocket. I've done everything I can to get on Metro North, to take the Metro North train into the city, to be beat up in a conference room for another 8 hours, so that I could quite possibly be on the stand, knowing that I got to make the trip back, and then. But the minute you step into the house, you've got a 1.5-year-old that comes up and, hey, Dad, here it is. And it's, even if you have to power through the Wiggles or Barney or whatever it is, take that time to appreciate what you have, because that's really what it's all about, is the family unit. And I couldn't have done it without my family unit and the friends that are there. And I will tell you, just like, we got a letter in the mail, like, from one of the residents in town. Hey, hang in there. We know this isn't you.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I mean, an amazing story, and I appreciate you so much. And for Rhonda too, who I've never met, that said, I asked you if you'd share your story, and you said, "Let me check with my wife." And so, Rhonda, I'm sure you'll listen to this. Thank you. I haven't met you, but you are a rock. I can't wait to meet you someday. If I'm on the East Coast, or coming over for lunch, I'm going to come say hi to you. This would be too good to pass up. Well, have a wonderful Christmas. I won't see you for a little while anyway, and we'll bring you back on. Like I said before, we'll bring you back at a year on the Smile Tour. And anyway, thank you so much for sharing your story, and to the audience for listening. Thank you, and have a wonderful holiday. You're welcome, buddy.
Have a great holiday. Thanks.
All right, see ya. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor. Share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.